Hello, and welcome to the International Symposium on Higher Education 2022. My name's Professor Noel Scott from Brisbane, Australia, and first of all I'd like to thank the Faculty of Hotel and Tourism Management at Universiti Teknologi Mara, Penang branch, and the College of Innovation, Thammasat University, Thailand, for allowing me to talk today. In passing, I'd also like to say hello to Dr. Com, who I know very well, so hi Com. Okay, well, what will I talk about today? So what I'm going to talk a little bit about is research and what it is and why we do it, and sort of, the reasons why, in particular, I do research. I guess the thing is that we should contrast the ordinary way we think and when we're trying to answer questions or think about a problem, and the way a scientific person might do that. So when I think about problems from my own personal view, without using a scientific approach, I base my thinking on my own personal knowledge. That may cause some problems. It may mean that I might try and solve a problem by only talking to people I know. That may lead to some responses that are biased in some way. Maybe I'll only talk to people who like me, or I might exclude people who I don't like but could solve the problem. I might also deal with a sort of a limited sample of people I might talk to, and I might only canvass the opinions of some people, or more, even more importantly, I might ask people some questions, but selectively listen to only try and remember or think about the answers that suit my own solution, perhaps, that I want. Scientific thinking is a bit different to that. Scientific thinking is based on a sort of a standard process and tries to be impartial. It tries to be an answer that I or another person would get in the same situation using the same method. So scientific thinking is based on these ideas like questions, well-defined questions, making observations, making standardized ways of collecting data. It's about having hypotheses that we are trying to prove or disprove. And certainly it's about theories. And for me, one of the most important things about scientific thinking is that it should be based on, it always is based on some theory that a person has about how the world works. So some of the important parts of scientific thinking. You build on previous evidence. If I'm trying to solve a problem, it would make sense for me to think back and see if I had solved that problem before. And did it work or didn't work? And so I would be trying to use my past experience to help me to be more effective in solving some problem. Well, that's what scientific thinking does, except it doesn't just use your own personal knowledge. There are thousands, millions, billions of people perhaps who have conducted research in the past, and they have left a legacy of their own findings, their own knowledge, their own learnings, which we call the scientific literature. So if we base our problem solving and our understanding of the problem on what has been written before, on how other people have tried to solve a problem and how they've thought about that problem, then we must be more advanced. We must be better. And so the first thing, I think, scientific thinking builds on previous people's thinking. We also use empirical evidence. So we don't just have a problem and then come up with a solution. We have a problem and then we start to say, well, how do I know how much of a problem I've got and how I might solve it, and how can I measure if I've solved it, and so on. So that's about deciding on your methodology and then collecting empirical evidence. We might also think logically, and I'll come back to that. And then also we may be skeptical. Again, interesting. So as I said, the first thing is building on previous evidence. So if we want to do research, we will start by understanding what has already been written about a topic. Typically that would be called doing a literature review. And so the idea of a literature review is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to waste your time trying to answer a question in a way which other people have already shown to be wrong. And it also helps you perhaps to understand and find the best way to solve a problem, one that has been proven to work in the past. The important thing here is never think that you are the first person to have studied a problem. Someone, somewhere, will have already solved a problem similar to the one that you're trying to think about. So if you can find that information, learn about how they did it, and build from there, you're much further advanced. So research is based on a knowledge of the literature. Research uses empirical evidence. Empirical evidence is evidence that you can touch or hear or smell or taste, something that you and I can agree on has already occurred. So that means it's evidence that other people can agree with you on, and it's repeatable. That means that if I do an experiment once and then I do it again, I get the same answer. Some people call that evidence found in nature, natural evidence. But one of the key things is you don't rely only on what other people tell you. And I'll come back to that. You have to be respectful of other people, and you have to understand that they might have spent a long time in researching and doing work, but that doesn't mean they are always right. And especially if someone tells you that there is only one answer to some problem, they are probably wrong. So try and use empirical evidence. Practice logical reasoning. So logic allows us to, if this, then that. It's a way of defining a problem in a way which is, well, logical. It's a skill or a discipline that you have to learn and practice. But once you get good at it, you'll find it extremely useful in understanding complex problems. And when you adopt logical reasoning, ideally, you're not using emotions to determine what's true. you don't believe that feelings are facts. They're not. And if you have values or beliefs that you believe are true, you've got to understand that other people will or may disagree with you, and that a value, something that you value, may be completely different to another person. So values are individual. Logic tries to look at things which are beyond the individual. Adopt a skeptical attitude. Well, skepticism means trying to be questioning, and don't just agree with something because a person tells you it's true. Now, this is difficult because in some cultures, especially in Southeast Asia or in Asia, there's a respect for higher people in high positions, and that's a very good thing. And of course, you should always respect people and treat them well, treat them with respect. But that's different from always believing they are right. In fact, sometimes the most respectful thing that you can do for a person is to politely indicate that perhaps they've said something wrong or something that you disagree with. Doesn't mean you're telling them that you're right. You're just saying, could you perhaps explain more about that? So a good researcher is constantly examining the evidence and arguments and reasons for their beliefs about their research topics. Not necessarily about everything, but certainly in terms of research. And so a good researcher questions the truth and reliability of knowledge claims about what people say, and also they question the knowledge that they already possess themselves. Sounds pretty tough, but it actually can be a wonderful thing. So why do we do research? What's the reason for it? Well, it's certainly a tool for building knowledge and facilitating learning. It's a means to understand issues and increase the public's knowledge of things which might be good for them, might help us to succeed in business. It might allow us to disprove lies and support truths. It's a means to find, gauge, and seize opportunities. Oh, yeah. It promotes a love of and confidence in reading, writing, analyzing, and sharing valuable information. And it provides nourishment and exercise for your mind. There's many reasons why you might do research. For me personally, I like it. I don't know why, but I've always liked to solve complex problems, problems for which I do not know the answer. And I guess that's why I've ended up as an academic, because academics, their job description is to perhaps try and solve problems which we don't know the answer for. Yeah, but it's also fun. I get enjoyment out of learning something new or solving some difficult problem. Everyone's different. Who does research? Well, everyone does. There are various reasons why a person might want to do research. For example, if you were the destination manager of a particular tourist destination, you might be doing lots of social media promotion, and you start to think, well, is it working? So you might then do some evaluation research. You might you might measure before you do some social media and then after you do some social media to see if there's some increase in some measurable indicator that your promotion is working. You might be using some theoretical frameworks such as the theory of persuasion, and you might be measuring it quantitatively. You might be establish some quantitative indicator, the number of people who have a positive attitude towards this destination, and you measure that beforehand, you measure it afterwards, and you might see a change. That doesn't prove the social media promotion is working, but it's an indicator that it might be. Another person who might need research is a graduate looking to get a job. So how would you go about finding a job? Actually, here's a tip. A good way to do that is to talk to lots of people and ask them if they could refer you to a friend who might have a job. That's using the idea of networks, where if you have 10 people that you talk to, they each have 10 people that they might know. So if you ask them, can you tell me someone who might have a job, you're actually talking not to one person, but he's thinking about his 10 people who he's in contact. So you're multiplying your 10 conversations with, so instead of talking 10 people, you're talking to 100 people effectively. And that might be qualitative research. You might just do it in terms of asking people questions. A hotel might be interested in improving their occupancy, and they might do some research. How would they do it? They might start to explore what nights that their occupancy is high, what nights their occupancy is low. They might think about what marketing they've done, and they are analyzing the secondary data, the data they have already recorded about their occupancy, to see if they can see a reason why it might be high or low. Good research. An academic might do research in terms of, well, some interesting research question. One research question that I'm interested in is, how do emotions affect our experiences? How do we react emotionally to our the experiences that we have? And I might use explanatory research based on appraisal theory to try and explain why we have some particular emotions derived from experiences. And in fact, I might actually measure that using some sort of skin conductance measure that I put on my hand, called galvanic skin response. Lots of different things that you can do in research. There are lots of different questions. And interestingly, if you can try and understand your problem and then fit it into, try and match it up with some ways that other people have solved that problem in the past, then it's going to help you very much in terms of doing, answering your problem. So, as I said, there's different types of research. We might have exploratory research, where you want to gain some familiarity with a topic or problem, discover some main interesting points about it, and that might lead then to a more structured research project. So that's exploratory research. Descriptive research is perhaps doing something which involves counting how many people might vote one way or the other in an election. So that's descriptive because you're collecting some data and using it to describe something. 48% said this, 52% said that. That's description. It's called descriptive, and it's not explanatory. It's not telling you why people are going to vote that way. It's just describing how many people say they're going to vote one way. Similarly, the Chinese travel market, we might be interested in describing the number of people who come from China, their gender, their age, how long they stay. Again, descriptive statistics. Or we might want to understand why a particular tourism destination has developed the way it did. This is actually how I sort of did my PhD. And I was very interested in why one destination grew in a particular way. And I found that there were specific people and specific events which influenced how the destination developed as it did. But that's when I'm talking about a case study of destination development where I try and determine why it developed in a way, then I'm moving from from descriptive studies to explanatory studies. So if I just describe how it developed, then it's descriptive. If I try and say it developed in this way, then I'm starting to try and explain its development. And that's about the cause and effect relationship between two variables. Understanding causality and cause and effect is extremely important if you're going to do research. And it's important to know when you can say that you have discovered some causal relationship and when you can't say it. So I think I'll talk about that a bit in future. So causal research is the object or the objective of doing causal research is to determine which variables might be causing a certain behavior. For example, remember that causality or a causal relationship is different to correlation. Correlation says when this one goes up, this one might go up. That's a positive correlation, positive association. But a causal relationship says this one goes up and then this one goes up, and the reason they go up is because they have this relationship with one another. Now, correlation does not prove causality. So, and in fact, despite many academic papers say they have proved causality, you can never really prove causality without any with certainty. You can only show that it is probable that there is causality. So I would strongly suggest that when you're doing your research, you think very, very carefully about, are you looking at association, like a correlation analysis, or whether you're trying to prove causality, which may mean that you have to undertake a very complex experimental design for your study. So correlation, again, does not imply causality. For example, there is a statistical correlation over months of the year between ice cream consumption and the number of assaults. Okay, so you can find a correlation. Does this mean that ice cream manufacturers are responsible for crime? Well, no. It means that there's some sort of intervening variable. The correlation occurs statistically because hot temperatures of summer cause both ice cream consumption and assaults to increase. Okay, so correlation does not imply causation. Other factors may lead to the effect that you see in terms of course correlation between two variables. So if you want to establish a causal relationship, here are some of the things you need to think about. You need to be able to show that the cause occurs before the effect. And that's pretty tricky sometimes, especially when you're talking about things that people are thinking or that are in people's minds. So establishing cause and effect can be difficult, or the order of them. There has to be a statistical association, that is changes in the value of the independent, that is the cause variable, must be accompanied by a change in the value of the dependent or the effect variable. The rationale, there must be a logical and compelling explanation for why these two variables are related. That's important. And that generally comes from some some theory, but many times the theories might try and provide some explanation, but it's not compelling. And then non-spurious, it must be established that the independent X and only X was the cause of the changes. So there may be different reasons why X is related to Y, or that different X's may be involved in the relationship, and you've got to show that it's only X and not only one X and not another one. That's the cause. So anyway, think about those. They're important reasons or important things to understand in terms of causal relationships. Often people, when they're doing research, jump straight to choosing the method that they're going to use. That's wrong. Before you identify the method that you're going to choose, you have to understand the theory that explains, or that you're going to use to explain what's going on. And that will often determine what type of methods you choose. Also, there are, even then, there are often different methods that you can use. And so you should think about the pros and cons, the positives and negatives of using different methods. So you might think about what are you studying? Is it going to be easy to collect data, or so on? The time availability. How much time have you got to collect your data? That might determine the method you choose. The cost, how much money you've got, might determine it. The set of assumptions that you make, or the philosophical questions that underpin your research, that come from prior research and theory, may determine your methods. So don't jump from identifying a question to thinking about a method. Where do you find a good research question? Well, you should be able to look at the end of recent journal articles in the section called Areas for Further Research and find good questions to do, to study. So every journal article should have an Areas for Further Research section, which should, in the opinion of the researcher who wrote the paper, provide follow-up research that should follow on and add to the research that this author is reporting. Problem is that in fact, a number of papers don't have a good area for further further research questions section. This one, so you can generally look at better research journals, tourism management, for example, to find papers which are more likely to have a good research question. This is one that I looked up. It's about something I'm interested in, motion and novelty. And in the end, future directions on the consequences of novelty. That's research that I've done in the past. It talks about some questions which might be good to study. Okay, well, it doesn't mean you might do that particular question exactly, but it gives you a good justification for doing research. You don't have to say, I came up with an interesting idea, I'm going to do this research question. You say, Professor Smith, or in this case, Professor Blomstervik and Olsons came up with these questions, and they're experts, and therefore I'm going to do what they suggested. Of course, you have to be skeptical. You have to read and understand what they say to make sure it's a good question. But that's one way of finding good research questions. What you don't say is, I want to do survey research, but I'm not sure what I'm studying. You've always, that's like saying, well, I'm going to collect some data and then see what happens when I start to analyze it. Wrong. Don't do that. Always start with a research question that can be justified as important based on the previous research. So what is a good research question? Well, they're relevant. That is, they're related to current issues discussed in the literature, maybe not from 2000 or 1990, perhaps things which are more recent. And the question and its answer will be of academic and intellectual interest. Okay. This is a good academic research question. Of course, if you're doing research for a practical reason, then it's got to be relevant in that your research helps to answer a particular question with some practical outcome. It should be manageable. You should be able to access the data, give a full answer to your question. It should be, especially as an academic paper, a way to show that you are able to understand the literature and to do something a little bit innovative. It should, well, if you're doing it for your course, it should be able to fulfill the learning outcomes that you're required, or as an academic article, it must be suitable for publication, for example. It should be clear and simple. The more complex question you make up, the harder it is to understand, and it should be interesting. One that your reader will be interested in, but certainly one that you are interested in, because you're going to be spending, I don't know, months, perhaps years studying this research question. So make sure it's something that you want to study. So research questions should be clear and unambiguous. They should be well connected to current theoretical empirical knowledge. So you should know the literature. They should be researchable. That means they're able to collect data on them. They should be important in some way, usually in terms of theory or application practice, and neither too broad or too narrow. You know, a couple of times I've seen academic papers which say, I am studying green-headed people who live on the top of mountains. Well, maybe that's an interesting question, but it's hard to see how it's going to be useful. So, in summary, I'd like you to think about research as doing something that you want to do, that is interesting for you, that gets you excited. I know that sounds strange, but research gets me excited. And something which you can add to knowledge, not just do something that's already been proven or shown to be true many times. So be innovative and enjoy your research. So thank you very much. I apologize that I couldn't be there to speak online during the conference. I've had to record this, but hopefully you're enjoying your time, and I hope that I can see you online again in future. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy. Here's my email. I'd be happy for you to send them to me. And I'm hoping that the organizers will share these slides with you so that you can read them again and again. Okay, so thank you very much.